Started. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Tactical Debrief. I am joined once again, yet again, by Wesley St. Hines, Nebo the Fish, coming through, and his first ever win, and the first ever win with the Recon Element. But Wesley, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Most of the fatigue from playing the army has worn off, so it's doing we're doing better.
That's good. I remember you saying that playing this was probably like the main enemy was your back.
Yeah, yeah. It's always funny because every time I play this, I'll like go to a tournament and I'll just like do stretches while I'm waiting for the game to start, and people are like, why?" And I'm like, "You don't understand
You
what I'm
don't
about to
understand.
go through. You don't understand the self-inflicted torture I'm about to put on myself, you know."
Yeah, I I can imagine. I know you said many times like guys, this detachment, this way of playing is maybe the best way to play in the game. However, I think what we
Dot
are going
dot
to
dot.
establish over the course of this video is that this detachment, regardless of how strong it is not for everyone.
No.
Absolutely. But, I mean, we've talked to you a couple times before. We've heard your history with the Guard. We've seen the Halo stuff. But one of the things I want to address before we get into this is when we were looking at this, you got not perfect 100s, but perfect 90s. What's the story behind that?
Um, yeah, we just scored 90 points every single
Every
game.
game
It was really
exactly
unique.
80. Don't worry about
Yeah.
it.
No, so yeah, so I did a teams tournament back in April. That also led to me taking a very long break from 40K. Not very long, 2 month break from 40K. Because pretty much anyone who follows along with my stuff knows that all of my models are Halo themed. They're a lot of files that I made myself or used from that the community created based off of models from the Halo Ground Command tabletop game. Um, and we were leaving from this tournament in April. On the way back to the cart, uh, my cart hits a pothole. My carrying case does a full 180, falls about 3 feet on the ground. Super large, crunch sound, followed by the sound of what is definitely all of my carrying trays falling out of the case because the case fell, and so you just hear a bunch of models collapsing on top of each other. And for what it's worth, I had a lot of tournaments back to back, and so for a lot of different lists with my guard, and so for ease of everything, all of my guard was in that case, not just the one army that I was bringing for that tournament. Um, and the thing with resin as opposed to plastic, if you don't have resin models, is that plastic will break and it will warp, but resin will shatter.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the guys were missing, their guns were breaking in three pieces, and they were not like gluable back together pieces. Half of heads were missing. Arms were in four pieces. More notoriously, my Rough Riders, which are mongooses from Halo, like 30 wheels just fell out of the case as soon as I opened the case. And I was carpooling with three people, and so it was a pickup truck, and so there wasn't a whole lot of room for everything, and so we're desperately trying to fix the army before we leave because we don't want to have to just we don't have room for loose models just to be
Yeah.
sitting, and then it just starts pouring, and the doors to the venue are locked, and we can't get back in to fix it, and everything has gone wrong, and I look at it and I hit the decision, and I was like, okay, anything that's broken in two plus places, I'm just gonna toss and call
Yeah.
it a day. And so, yeah, the first ever 40K army I made, a lot of which I made the models for, myself and painted, just gone.
Yeah.
And so took like a 2 month break and started getting the actual models, and we're actually at a point now where we can put the army back on the table. A lot of which has been from like a lot of help from friends on the area or on teams I'm on. Um, like a good friend, like I'll just he knows his name, but Jeff is like will just flat out like painted a lot of my models too, just to make it go really fast and help streamline the process. And it's been really nice, like not just tearing myself apart because people in the community have been a good help getting the army back together.
Yeah. I can imagine just like I've had nowhere near that level of like collapse, but I've like had one of my trays and I just like slipped on like a wet patch on the ground, and so like one of my trays just goes like flying. And luckily, most of like I think it depends on like what kind of resin you're working with, right? Some of it will just shatter and it's like irrecoverable. Sometimes they're just like a chunk of rock that are not going to break no matter what you do. But it's still, even that was just like kind of heartbreaking. So I can't imagine what it was like with, multiple thousands of points all the time. So I'm glad we have you back. I'm glad we get to see you playing once again. Have you switched up like the style of painting or the style of like models that you're using because of that?
Yeah, yeah. So, originally it was all as one-to-one Halo as I could have it be, which also raised concerns because not everyone knows what one-to-one Halo looks like.
Fair.
That's a whole different tangent. But yeah, I've been a big fan of like the elite infantry being like a stormtrooper white and the normal infantry being like the UN like blue
Mhm.
color that they've been using. Um, I don't know. I don't know if there's like pictures I can send to make it easier. But it's just like Stormtrooper white for everybody elite, and then it is a blue like just navy royal blue, with like gray and brown khakis for everybody else.
Nice.
Just nice and simple, nice and crisp.
Yeah. Well, with that out of the way, so now that we have a little bit of understanding of why this isn't five perfect 100s coming out and why the games were maybe a little bit closer than we expected, Nima, can we go ahead and start talking about the list that you actually brought?
Yeah. So as with most of my lists, this is like a very stock standard meta version of Guard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, yeah.
Definitely not
Um,
the longest list I've ever seen.
Yeah, if you put this in Excel, it's like 330 lines for anyone curious. But so the list was originally the best. We have to start with the most important thing, which is the title.
Hmm.
The list was originally going to be 120 Kriegsmen,
Okay.
and then the data slate comes out. And even though rules lock and list lock was a week and a half before the data slate came out, the TO's like, "Hey, we're going to use the new data slate," which is fine. They're allowed to do that. I'm allowed to get upset about it as well, though, to be fair.
Yeah.
And coming from somebody who does not have models to use, and I had just finished building my 120 Kriegsmen for this event, and I'm like, let's go, I'm so excited. And then I see my list went up 110 points because Kriegsmen are plus 15 and I have 620 mans.
Woohoo.
And so the list title is just, oh boy, I finally finished building my 120 Kriegsmen. I'm so excited to put this list on the table. And then it's a picture of Kriegsmen going up 15 points for 20.
Yeah,
um,
that's one of two titles of this. Let's be clear.
Yes, yes. The other one is throwing Joshi under the bus and saying Joshi personally told me that he really likes the way I format my lists,
Yeah.
because Joshi has told me several times that it is an eyesore and he hates it with a passion.
It's
Um,
very funny to me. So if anybody is not familiar going through, remember that every unit that Nemo's about to say has like the title of the unit, but right before that, there's also the personalized like unit name. So his Gaunt's ghosts are Alpha 9.
yes,
And so
and
go ahead.
and rather than having Gaunt, Korbeck, Mikhail, Rane, and Larkin, I have Dare, Mickey, Romeo. Dang it, I'm gonna get it wrong.
Fake fan.
Dare, Mickey, Romeo, the rookie, and Buck as my ghosts. Um, and so it's just like, but it's like at the very, very forefront of every single one of the models. And it's if you're trying to just like read a list and be like, oh, what was this? It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
And likewise, my list is titled the UNSC 42nd
Yeah.
Infantry
No,
Regiment.
I will say I do prefer this because there's like an orc player that I know who will do the same thing. He will name every single one of his war bosses with an orc name, but as someone who's familiar with Guard at the very least, I can like mentally parse that out. However, for the orc characters, I'm like, who is Toothkilla? Is this like a real character that I need to go look up in the codex? Because it sounds like it would be. So at least
Yeah,
like I can read this one. It just takes a little bit of extra work. But anyway,
yeah.
let's go ahead and talk about
Um,
it.
so, so the list is just platoon galore. So you have your supporting cast to make sure you have orders to issue everybody in the army. That's Gaunt's Ghosts, that's Ursula, and then three Cadian Castellans with three Cadian command squads. For this list, all of the Cadian command squads are kitted with Power Fist plasma gun. Power Fist plasma pistol, and then the veteran guardsman is also Power Fist plasma pistol, so doubling up. Um, and then the Castellans are the same way. It's that way because, as we'll talk about in a bit, it allows the squad to have a crazy amount of punch, compared to the OBG CCS that we talk a lot about in Guard, is like our forefront skirmish unit. And then following up with our front line, all of our platoon is we're rocking, I want to say 30 Catachan, 80 Cadians, and 70 Kriegsmen. So it's just everything as is. Again, ideally, you're looking at more 20 mans of Krieg, but now that they're 145, I just don't think they make the cut.
Hmm.
And 85 is such a stupid breakpoint for guard. Like 85, 80. It's like one of those things where like people look at a list and they're like, why is this here? And it's like, well, the alternative was the 65-point option and playing down 20 points. And so that's why we have, the 20 break of Krieg in there is there's just not a good alternative. Like
Hmm.
there's nothing that fits besides a scout sentinel, an armored sentinel, ratlings, or like Catachan Cadians. And if I'm going to play Catachan or Cadians, I'd rather just play the same thing, but with an extra revive.
Yeah.
So that's why we have the one big brick. Everybody is fully plasma melta. Everybody is otherwise everything that's optional is included. And then the list rounds out with 20 Rough Riders, 110, two fives, and then one unit of Death Riders. I was originally going to do two Death Riders just because I think after the points buff that they make the cut. Um, but I didn't have them all built when I submitted my list, and I didn't want to hold myself to having to build them going up to the tournament. And then also I just was already playing 20 Rough Riders, so I was like, let's see if it is. Notably, I again we'll probably talk about in a bit, but the Death Riders like definitely make the cut. They definitely go up to 2x5.
Yeah.
Um,
Fair enough. So, I mean, the first thing that I look at this, and I think what a lot of people look at this, is they instantly take a look at this list and they just go, where's the damage? How does this kill anything on the opponent's side of the board?
yeah, you're right.
He
It's
just
not
kind of
there.
does it. Okay. So,
um,
go ahead.
yeah, no. So this list is just law of large numbers, right? If you roll enough dice, you'll get there eventually. And there were definitely turns where my shooting phase involved 300 dice. And it's part of the reason why, at the beginning we were like, this list isn't for everyone. Um, when I go to my shooting phase, it is just nonstop, right? You need to be doing everything immediately. You need to know exactly what you're looking for and everything. And it was actually kind of cool because at the tournament, I want to say three of my opponents they're really like, I'm fascinated by how fast you can roll last guns. So I was like, oh, thank you, right? But no, like the list outputs, on its go turn, it outputs like 400 shots of last gun. It outputs in the ballpark like 70 shots of plasma and like 15 to 20 shots of meltagun. And so the list, it's really its go turn is not like not like Ironstorm Marines or Gladius Marines or like Renegade Raiders where it's like, okay, our go turn is 1,500 points, the opponent's army is gone, right? We are not skewed into a standard list. We are not skewed into this part of my list is scoring, this part of my list is damage. We are skewed into everything is scoring. And so when you look at a normal game plan with 40k, you're like, I need to have this damage because I need to make sure that when I strike and go, that my damage is going to stay alive. It's going to get to activate again. I'm going to get value out of my pieces, and I'm going to win the game.
Hmm.
Recon's alternative is it goes, my damage just needs to be enough to kill the 3 or 4 pieces in your army that are meant to kill mine, right? And so when I'm playing against, like Gladius Ultramarines, I don't care if the Vindicator lives. I don't care if the 3 Ballistices are alive. I care that the Blade Guard are dead. I care that Calgar is dead, right? I care that the things that have high density attack die. And so all I need is enough damage on my go turn that those pieces get killed. The rest I don't care about because we were talking about this on Joshi's server, but for reference, a lot of things when you start looking at the resiliency of this army don't deal damage.
Yeah.
The funny one was 6 Helverns, which have 48 shots of autocannon, kill 7 guardsmen on average. Um, and so like you just have to kill the things that are going to kill you. You don't have to kill everything
Yeah.
because the list is all scoring. You win the scoring game as long as you and your opponent are alive and you have equal material. You win that transaction.
Yeah. One of the things I've oftentimes heard you talk about, and one of the things that I think has been central to the way you've been building lists for a while, is the concept of parity. And could you explain what this concept means and how you utilize it in the game?
Yeah, so the most common example that I use is in Magic because a lot of people have played Magic and are aware of it. But in Magic, there's this archetype called Death and Taxes, and its whole concept is I'm going to put a bunch of effects that are mean, that are painful, that affect the board in negative ways. However, I'm going to specifically play cards and interactions that make them affect you more than they affect me. And why that is an important thing to talk about is it's because when we're talking about the puzzle that is 40K, about solving a game and how we go about it, Death and Taxes goes, we're both solving the same puzzle, but it's easier for me to solve. Right? I have tools that make the game state that we both have to deal with not the same.
Yeah.
And 40K is the same way. We both have a puzzle that we have to solve. We both have to stand on objectives. We both have to draw secondaries, and we both have to score those secondaries. But the whole point of Recon Guard's idea is that it breaks parity by not having to solve that puzzle the same way you do. When you go to solve that puzzle, and I have 20 Kriegsmarine on an objective, and you start going down the checklist, and you're like, can I auto see this unit? And it's
No.
no, it's 104 OC.
Yeah.
No, you can't. And you go, well, can I battle shock this unit? I guess I'm not playing one of the 3 armies in the game that have that mechanic.
Mm-hmm.
Shucks, right? And so then it comes down to the only thing left, which is, well, can I kill this unit, right? And you're forced to deal that. You're forced to do that interaction to deny me points. And how does it work for me? You go, my 160 point Gladiator Lancer is on this objective, and I go, cool, 1 guardsman, mine.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing about Recon Guard that is silly is if everyone in this list has the plus OC order, it's about like last time I did the math with the previous list, I had 756 OC. And for reference, by the way, you're like, I know that's high, but how high? The Gladius vehicle spam Ultramarines list that Conan plays has 63. Um,
That's
so
less than 1 unit of guardsmen.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
And so whenever I submit this list for like a scrim or for like a casual tournament, I title the list of my list has 17.6 Norns of OC. And that makes people realize just how silly Recon is. It's just like my ability to answer the puzzle is I just have to throw 1 squad on you. It's got to put 1 to 2 guardsmen on each objective. Mine, you lose, you get 0 primary,
Yeah.
And your way of denying me that is killing 200 guardsmen. And if 2 of those guardsmen live, I spend 1 CP and it doesn't matter.
Yeah. I
So
think one of the big things that a lot of people also get lost on is how effective Recon is at making those guardsmen durable. A lot of people think, oh, yeah, I'll shoot 1 Chaos Knight or like 1 Brigand and I'll kill, it's got 12 shots. Oh, that's probably like 10 guardsmen dead. Not in this detachment, right? Like Chaos Knights, we've talked about it. Like it is one of the worst matchups, but like realistically, I think a Gatling chain gun from a Brigand is only going to kill like 5 on average, something like that.
it should be, yeah, the 12 shots should be what, 10 hits into 8 wounds into I save on 4s, lose 4 guys.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
Um
if it takes 5 brigands to kill 1 unit of 20 Kriegsmen, that is just not a points efficient trade at all. And so basically the
yeah.
way that it works, right, is you have the take cover order, which improves the save by 1, and then the recon rule says if you are also in cover, you again improve the save by 1. So you're at a 3-up power armor save on your guys, and then you have cover. So it's just you're effectively a 2-up save guardsman. A lot of people don't really respect that a lot of the time. With that in mind, though, what are bad matchups for this? If you just out OC everyone and you just flood the board, what are you worried about pairing into?
Um so the most common one, just the answer up front, is usually high density and spread out melee.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when I say it that way, I say high density and spread out because a lot of people go to is they're like, oh, Custodes is great against this army, right? Like
Mm,
Custodes has enough bodies where they can like try and screen out a point. They have 2-up saves, and also whenever they get into combat, they just murder you. And the thing is that first part of recon is where people tend to stop. They go, oh, it's cover and +1 save. Well, that only works in shooting. So let's put them into a melee army. And the sad reality of recon is its stratagems are backbreaking for melee armies.
mm-hmm.
There's a 6-inch reactive move. There's a -2 to charge, which means if you move 1.1 away from me, it's a 9-inch charge. And so if that big old brick of, like Trajan and 5 Wardens, a Blade Champion and 5 Wardens move up to me, and it's anything in the ballpark of a 3 to a 4-inch charge, you just don't get to charge me. I'm not going to let it happen.
Yeah.
And so we're talking things like World Eaters, things like Emperor's Children, things like Blood Angels. They tend to be the issues. Those matchups tend to be more like, okay, well, now we're starting to solve the same puzzle because you killing me is actually you killing me
Yeah.
is something you can do pretty easily. And then also high density ignores cover and high density high AP shooting. And I have to say, high density ignores cover because also a lot of people like to think Tau is a great counter to Recon, and it's not because most Tau lists have like Sunforge battlesuits or Riptides or any of those things, and those models are 200 points and shoot 9 shots. And so it's like, yeah, it's cool that you ignore cover. It's cool that my 9 models die. But if your 200-point heavy hitting gunline piece cannot even kill half of a 100-point squad, I'm winning that matchup.
Yeah.
So yeah, CKEC World Eaters are
Yeah.
like the big
I
ones.
want to touch back on one of the things that I think a lot of people might not have picked up on there and make sure I understand it too is when you say it needs to have like diverse, you need to have like a bunch of units that have this high density. The reason for that, I think, is if there's just one melee threat, you don't let that one thing charge. However,
Yeah,
if they have two melee threats, one of them's going to get in. Is that the
yeah.
big
Like if
difference?
if if your list is built around 10 Terminators and a character as a 500-point hammer, that unit is never making a charge the whole game.
Mhm.
That or it's bombing a 9, but otherwise it's never making a charge the whole game.
Yeah.
And so, but the thing is, if we go on your go turn and there's like three 10 mans or three, five heavy hitting mans that all, take this the left, center, right. I have to choose which one goes. But if it's 10 Terminators and two small mans, I think we all know which one I'm picking. That's not
Yeah.
going to get to charge.
Yeah, that makes sense. So one of the things that is a little bit interesting then is there are Tau lists out there, especially I don't know what it's actually called, but my friend calls it the DACA commander, where you just have like as many burst cannons in one unit. Have you run into that at all? Because I'm pretty sure because it puts out like 50 plus shots, each of which is like ignoring cover at like AP 1 or 2. Is that something you've run into at all, and is it something that's given you any issues? No,
Never.
never.
No. Um, I I mean, it sounds interesting, but I think it has the same issue of three, what those would be star size that have the like flame, or no,
I don't remember if it's
what
fire knives or
fire
star
knives.
size,
I
whichever
think
one
it's
it
fire
is.
knife. Yeah, because it's whichever one chooses flamer. They can choose between flame or burst can. So I think that's fire
I think it's
knife.
rocket or burst
Um,
cannon, but
I don't know
either
Tau.
way, whichever
Yeah.
one it is.
But it's just the same issue where again, that's a unit that I can kill, and that's a
Mhm.
unit that can't trade in points, I think. Right?
Fair.
Like that's your unit that comes up and kills something. I lose 120 points of guardsman, which is fair. But then I have 55 shots of plasma, and you're not, or whatever the number is. But I have enough shots of plasma where if you moved within 12 inches of me to get those buffs for the extra AP, you're dying.
Fair.
And I just need to kill the 1 or 2 units that do that.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the horses a little bit. You have a mix of Rough Riders and the Death Riders. The Death Riders, up until the most recent MFM, were just too expensive for anything. Let's start with them. What are the Death Riders doing in this list?
The Death Riders are just a unit that gets to 6-inch reactive every turn for free if they move within 9. And then they are just Rough Riders that don't have the Melta version of the Lance. Two notable exceptions that make them really good at filling a gap that I tend not to like about Rough Riders is they don't have to take the frag tip. They also have an AP2 3 attack power weapon. And also their hooves are an extra AP compared to the Rough
Oh,
Riders. They're 411 as opposed to
because they're
401.
claws.
Exactly. They have little clawed hooves. By the way, if you ever want to see something weird, look at Death Riders compared to Rough Riders. It's
They
the
are not
horses have
horses.
they're not horses. They have like the most weird looking front legs you'll ever see. Um, but yeah, so the that unit has just been really good at just being like, I drew area denial, gonna walk forward.
Mhm.
You want to stand on the center objective because it's 40k, and obviously you do want to do. They're gonna move 6 inches back behind terrain and be safe, right? Like day one was layout 8, for example, with that new ruin. One guy would just tow out right in front of there so that he could get the area denial, and then with a 6-inch reactive, get behind that 8-inch center ruin piece and stay hidden.
Mhm.
But also notably, they are another 5-man version of Rough Riders that can answer MSU infantry on objectives. Because I think I think the point I've hit with Recon is I'm only allowed to run 3 units of Rough Riders. That's my cap. And Death Riders are a nice unit that can fulfill the same skirmish role of Rough Riders while still allowing the Rough Riders to be anti-tank, no invuln
Yeah.
killers. And so, like, I had a couple World Eaters matchups, and every time that unit would just walk into 10 Bloodletters, pick up the whole unit, and then the Rough Riders would still be available to deal with Forge Fiends and Hell Brutes and Greater Demons. And so they just double down as Rough Riders that are also just a little more resilient and harder to charge into.
Gotcha. So what do you think if you could rebuild it? I know you said that you'd look at 2 units of Death Riders, but I kind of wonder about like the third, because you have like 1 10 Rough Riders, 2 5 Rough Riders. What if they were both just Death Riders?
Um, so I was so happy with them that I think going up to 30 total horses is where I want to be. Um, I think the Rough Rider, I didn't have to deal with many whole spam lists this tournament.
Hmm.
But I don't, so like based off the 5 games I played last weekend, I think that totally works.
Sure.
But I think if I play into CK or IK, I would really love to keep those extra 20 Rough Riders just for those matchups.
Fair.
Um, yeah.
All right. Well, the last thing that I really wanted to touch on in terms of like the actual list building in this, because it seems to make a lot of sense to me, but one of the pieces that I've been on record many times as a major hater of the unit is the Cadian Castellan. And I think at least in combined arms, this model is pretty terrible. However, you have, is it 3 of them in this list?
3 whole Cadian
All right.
Castellans.
Why are they here?
They're terrible. Next,
Moving
um,
on.
so
It would be the first time we've seen
so
the Aegis defense line.
yeah. So the Castellan as a whole, he is not good in guard because he doesn't fill a role that guard needs solved, right? If you're running, 3 Rogals, 4 Lehmans, a Hellhound, and your 2 Toraxes, you don't care a whole lot about your opponent tagging a Rogel. You just go, oh, I'm just gonna pivot my turret and shoot you to death.
Yeah.
When your army is entirely infantry, and not only that, your entire army is 5, usually 6, 7, 8, 20-man bricks of infantry, getting charged into and then your opponent consolidating into one model means I'm just down a third of my shooting. Um, and so the Cadian Castellan at the front value allows my second line of infantry, the ones that usually get charged into with the heaviest hitting stuff, to not be a taggable unit. And so now, like, it literally came up several times in every single one of my games where my opponent would charge into my Catachan and go, okay, I guess I'm going to consolidate and tag. And I would go, just so you know, I fall back and shoot, and I have 10 attacks of Power Fist. And they'd be like, okay, wait, never mind. And then I would just stand still and shoot them to death. But
Yeah.
without those Castellans in every single scenario, my opponent would just tag the unit, 20 less models get to shoot that turn. And that's like good enough for me. But the other part about this that's really awesome is into most things that can kill infantry, it's usually infantry that do it, right? It's usually the infantry who have chainswords, it's usually the tanks who have laser destroyers.
Yeah.
And the Castellan also gives sustained hits. And so when you give your unit +2 attack with rapid fire, first ring fire, second ring fire, the unit's overwatch becomes pretty darn good. It's not as good as Scions with full hit rerolls, but it's genuinely close. Because Scions originally would shoot 11 shots of plasma across 3 guns, 2 pistols, and then about 20ish shots of las gun. The Cadian unit, with their 4 las guns, 3 pistols, shoots 15 shots, so 4 less without rerolls. But they shoot close to 80 something shots of las gun, almost 4 times what the Scions shoot.
Yeah.
And so into a usual 5-man skirmish unit that's going to be hitting you with 30 something chainsword attacks, 1 CP, they're dead. And that's a nice thing. That's a nice tool to have, especially spread out across your army, and especially when it is your army's counter. It's nice to have that tool that just answers that so cleanly and so efficiently.
Yeah.
And also, for everyone who's like, it's 6s, it's swingy, as long as you kill 2 or 3, again, the unit has 3 power fists. You just need to kill them enough where that's going to finish the job.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's really interesting because in general I've been not impressed with them in I think they like maybe are playable in mechanized. They're not really useful in combined. Maybe there's a place for them in Siege Regiment where you get the full hits thing, but I mean they do actually sound incredible in this detachment specifically. And I remember I think you said in the Discord at some point like they are auto take for this army.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My first couple games of Recon, I had 0. and then I was like, let's try it out. And
Hmm.
I it's like that thing with like if you like play Ursula Creed versus not, and you're just like, oh, this is good. It was one of those like it like 5 games in a row. Every time I was like, my model did the thing it's supposed to do. This is consistently impacting my games. And it was that way at the GT
Yeah.
too. Every game the Castellans felt good. Every game it was awesome. And also most notably, um, sustained hits in their normal shooting. Again, it's another damage buff. You
Yeah.
effectively hit on threes now.
Hmm.
So it's a great unit.
Yeah. Fair
And
enough.
just because Joshi also prefaced it too, for everyone listening to this also, um, this is just a recon thing. Like
Yeah.
I would still not play Castellans in another detachment. They are only good in this one.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk a little bit about like the logistics of actually playing this army then, because it sounds like the basic game plan then is you're going to go in, you're going to just auto see them on the point. Maybe they kill you, maybe they don't, but you have another wave ready to go to just do it again next turn. You just do that over and over again. They can never get to our objectives. We're going to score everything because we have units everywhere we want on the board. They're going to have difficulty scoring max. They can probably score pretty well a lot of the time, but they're probably not going to score max on things. Let's talk about the logistics. Movement trays. You've got a lot of bodies. What do you use movement trays, and what are they used for?
Yeah, I have like 26 movement trays. I have so many movement trays. My command squads have movement trays. It's like everyone who could have a movement tray reasonably has a movement
Yeah.
tray. So the big thing with this army again is the clock,
Hmm.
and so anytime you can speed up something to make it go faster, you should be. Most notably is deployment phase. The simple action of not having to reach over 3 times and just having to grab one tray and set it down is great. That is like the bare minimum should be the case for every single movement tray. It's just one squad on the table, one squad on the table, clock, one squad on the table, clock.
Yeah.
Um, and you can't do that if you don't have movement trays. And then the other thing to note is anytime the movement can be simplified and you don't care about the positioning of your models, um, I just push the movement tray forward, right? Like your expansion objective, that squad's just going to move 6 forward. Just move it forward. It
Yeah.
speeds up the movement, speeds up everything.
That was really gonna be my
The
next
move,
question. Is like when do you break off of the movement tray? Because to some degree, there's like you said, it's like these guys they're going here. Maybe I'll pull like one guy off the movement tray so you can't see him on this angle or whatever. But like, I guess what turn do most units tend to come off the movement tray?
almost always by turn 2, and a lot of them turn 1. It is as simple as the second I care about their positioning, they're out of the tray.
Hmm.
And for a lot of maps, having 2 guys in or 2 rows of 10 is not a good way to hide. I would rather have 4 rows of 5, 5 rows of 4. And so the second that happens, squad's out of the tray.
Yeah.
There's a lot of times, and this is why they're usually always out by turn 2, is I love to space my squads not in a brick, right? I love to have them all start together, but I also love when I move them to have the first rank move 6, the second rank move 5.5, then 5, then 4.5. Because that way, if my opponent does charge into me, it's really easy for me to force coherency pulls and get out combat that way.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of times it really does boil down to the second I care, the tray's gone. And so usually only 1 to 2 squads are even left in the tray after turn 2.
Fair. And then the other thing is you've got a lot of lasguns. I know a lot of people like if I were to play this the first couple times I played this over the board on a clock, I'm just skipping the lasgun rolls just because they probably don't do a lot of damage. How do you prioritize your shooting? What activations need to happen? And what activations you can probably let go?
Um, it is as how scared am I of that unit activating is how it is. So first matchup I had against World Eaters, there were 2 Forge Fiends, and my ability to kill Forge Fiends when they are not in my rapid fire range, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And so for those units, I was like, here's the plasma, last concern firing. Roll, call it a day. For the Berserkers that were, outside Blood Surge range that I really needed dead, all the last guns are rolling. What I will preface with this list, if you're someone who wants to play it and wants to go down the hellhole that is Recon Guard, um, it is so vital that those times you choose not to roll are rare. Um, and what I mean by that is my turn 1 movement phase like at best is 5 minutes. Sorry, at worst is 5 minutes
Mhm.
because I need to go into round two with like an hour 10, hour 15, and then same thing. Round two, I'm shooting the key targets because again, I need that clock high. And the goal is it's not a matter of, oh, but what are you going to do if your shooting phase takes 30 minutes? It's a matter of I have so much time banked from playing turn one and two very fast that I can afford to spend 30 minutes.
Interesting.
Um, and there's a lot of tricks to do that, especially when it comes to rolling my las gun dice. The first time a big brick activates, I break it up into like three things, and I'll count up. I'll be like, okay, I have 25 dice in my hand. I'll do that in front of my opponent, and I will just push all the rest of the dice I have to the side. Because then I look at my opponent and I go, okay, this squad is shooting. I know the last squad shot you 75 times. This squad's shooting you 50, and we know I have 25 dice, and I won't count my dice. I just immediately grab it and roll.
Yeah.
And so when I get to the point where I'm like, okay, 24 shots, one aside, roll the dice. 26 shots, add one, roll the dice, pull it away after. Um, I don't count dice after the first time.
Yeah.
I won't count any increment of dice that's more than like five after that.
Fair.
So
One of the things that I found interesting playing the version of Bridgehead that you first introduced me to is depending on the army, especially if my army was also playing like a hordish army. Uh, One of the things I would say at the beginning of the game is, "Hey, look, I would love to talk to you after the game. I need all of this clock." Is that something that you experience as well with this kind of army?
yeah, I'm very upfront with my opponents about it. I will admit I was pretty lax this tournament because for four of my five matches I had played the person before,
Hmm.
and I knew clock was not going to be an issue for our game. But my rule of thumb is if I don't know the person, it's always a clock.
Yeah.
Um, and so for round one, it was the same thing. We played on clock, and there was just like two times where it was just like that's just like, hey, not to be rude, but this is a thinking turn for me. I need to focus. And so I'm trying to be a bit more lax about it because it is also a game at the end of the
Yeah.
day. I do enjoy talking to my opponent more, but there are definitely moments where I'm like, hey, I know we're having a great time, not now.
Yeah.
So
Fair. Totally fair. Cool. I think those are the major things to talk about. I mean, otherwise, do you want to describe how hard this game or how hard this army is on your back and on your body?
it's really not as bad as I joke about it being. But that's also because I take a lot of steps to not have it be hard on my body,
Yeah.
right?
How tall are you?
Um, I'm not very tall. I'm like
Okay.
5'6", I think.
Oh, okay.
I haven't actually measured myself in many years,
Fair.
but I think I'm 5'6".
Yeah.
Um, but like I like every day or like every morning or like pregame, just do back stretches, right? Reach for your toes, right?
Hmm.
Any of that jazz. Um, because it's always funny to me because there's a bunch of people who I don't like coach but talk to a lot about the list, and they'll be like, "I'm in so much pain. This sucks." And I'll be like, "Just do stretches," and immediately they'll be like, "This tournament didn't suck. Wow!" And
Wow.
it's like, can you imagine? It's like the amount of work you're doing is on par with most workouts, most like casual sports, where it just like yes, everywhere you look, people will tell you stretch, treat your body well, and you'll have good results. And it's the same thing here.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, I this list sucks. I'm in pain, and it's like, so take steps to not be in pain.
Yeah. I mean, bring painkillers
Um,
if you need to. I know people who do that.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was. I think it was so funny. I played Ben Sherwood in round four, and one of the ruins we were down a piece of terrain, and he just slams a bag of ibuprofen on the table and just takes like 20 pills and uses that to build the ruin. And I'm like, my man, great.
That's really funny, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess the last question before we start talking about the games is the average player, right? I made that meme. I sent it to you. For if anybody's not familiar, I'll put it up on screen. When Carria, who is one of the best like supports of all time in League of Legends, he was playing Varus support, which if anybody knows anything about League of Legends, that is normally an AD carry. He was playing it, and after playing it and having some decent success, he comes up on interview and he's just like, "You are not Carria. Your team is not the best team of all time. Keep that in mind before you start playing this at home." I made the same thing for you. However, I'm curious, how good of a player do you need to be in order to make recon work?
uh, it's just practice. Um, I mean, I think everyone who's played 40K for a few games knows that several of the armies in the game are objectively harder than others. I think StatCheck even has a thing for it where if you go to their website, you can go to like meta breakdown. They even have like this cool graph that will show you like ELO win rate versus detachment win rate versus just overall win rate. And you'll notice very quickly that some armies are really, really good when played well. Um, Recon's in that category. It just is. It's an army where you need reps on it, and that doesn't mean you have to be a good player, but it means you need to know the army, right? And one of the examples I'll give, I'll talk through this really quickly. And if you follow along with what I'm saying, you'll get an idea of what I mean. And if you don't, try and recreate on the table. Um, at the most basic level, if I am playing, say, the ritual, and my opponent spawns an objective 9 inches away from the center and puts one unit on that objective, and I go, okay, my unit that just started the turn, hugging my deployment line because it's turn one, is 24 inches away because, it's the normal deployment zone and they put the ritual objective right on the edge of their deployment line. If you can figure out why the lieutenant they put on their center objective means that all I need is an 8-inch charge to steal that objective from them, that's what Recon does. And so at the base level, in case you're curious what I'm talking about, Tactical Tourist has a great video on this. He got some flack for it because people didn't realize this is a thing in the game, but it's called a swing charge.
Mm-hmm.
Recon is swing charges.army. It is swing charges are very hard to pull off. They're very hard to do well on time. Um, but when you can look at a lieutenant in the center of the board and be like, that lieutenant has now given me a 9-inch move forward, I'm going to chain out the back half of my models away from the lieutenant so that it will be very easy to do pile-ins, consolidates, and charges. And then you go, okay, well, if I make a charge, I get a pile-in, I get a consolidate, so that's 6 inches of movement. I move 9, so that's 15 inches of movement. And the objective's 24 away, so 15 plus 9 is 24. All I need is a 9-inch charge. The second that you can look at that and be like, that is my game plan this turn, you can play Recon. However, that is really hard to do.
That is,
Like just
yes.
as is, yeah.
Man, I tried to do one of those at my last GT, and even just the one time I had to do it took like, I had 10 minutes of clock going to the bottom of 5. I used up like 9 minutes trying to actually make this move work. Partly because I don't do it very often. I'm sure if I did it more often, it would be like easier for me to figure out, but man, that was hard for me to do. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense. I think if you don't know how to do that, is Recon just like not play, or can you not like
It,
have
it's
winning?
it's not something you should consider.
Fair.
Because the biggest advantage of 20-man bricks by a mile is those charges become really easy.
Yeah,
Not to see, but really easy to pull off, right?
fair.
Because when you only have 5 Space Marines, and Space Marine 1 has to base, and Space Marine 2 has to be 2 away, 2 away, 2 away, 2 away, at best, you can be like 10 inches away from the thing you charged.
Yeah.
But when you have 20 guys, and each one of them can chain the squad out 2 inches, all of a sudden your threat range around that circle is just what you roll on the dice, right? Like that unit can string out minimum like 45 inches.
Yeah.
And so you're like, hey, I rolled a 12 on the charge. I'm going 18 with it, however I want, so long as in the movement phase I set myself up to do that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's really
and that's the
tough. Yeah, I think
it's what
something that
Recon does well.
you talk a lot, or that you talk about a lot, is just like how much TTS that you play. And so like I imagine that just getting those reps in helps a lot. I think we'll I think we'll keep the actual game section pretty short because I think this is mostly a very conceptual army. Um, you are kind of known at this point, at least amongst people who follow my channel, as someone who innovates a lot in terms of like what is possible in the guard, right? I think like other players like Nassim, fantastic player, but he's been playing variations on the same army pretty much this entire edition, right? David Gaylord has innovated a little bit with the mechanized, but it hasn't really caught on. What do you do that allows you to be so so innovative and able to come up with all these different ideas? Is it just you try everything, or does it come from a point of theory first?
Definitely theory, like without a doubt. Um, a lot of what I ask myself when actually step one is I don't net deck from people.
Mhm.
Like if you ask me what Nassim's playing, I don't think I could actually tell you. I know he was responsible for why he's being coined as responsible for why Kriegsman got nerfed. So I'm gonna guess 20-man Kriegsman bricks, but I assume it's like tanks, and I don't know the rest.
Fair.
I don't look at other people's lists because I don't. Part of the 40k strategy that interests me the most is the list building aspect, the idea of building the coolest thing that I can, the thing that is the best on the table, the thing that, after accounting for the matchups I think I'm going to see, genuinely accounts for all of them. um, and a lot of that comes down to, well, what accounts for the things I want to deal with. And so part of the reason why the OBG CCS was winning for me is because I just had a day where I was like, there's a lot of high density, high AP melee in my area, and I want a unit that's going to actually, hold that, that's going to actually chunk that. And I don't want it to be a tank because I want to have the variability of being able to move around. Um, and so you start doing the math, and I talked about on the last time I was on here talking about the OBG CCS, but you start looking at the breakpoints of how AP2 Strength 4 or Strength 5 is into Catachan versus the OBG unit, and you realize that, well, this unit survives. And so clearly it wins. And then you start putting on the table after you're like, well, this unit fills the goal I want, and then it clicks. You're like, this is awesome, right? And sometimes it sucks. Sometimes it's terrible. Like Ratlings, on theory, look awesome. They fill all the rules for things I want to play. And then every time I play them, I'm like, I hate this. This is bad.
Fair.
But eventually they stick, and you give them a shot. And the best way to get yourself into that mindset is, rather than be like, hey, this unit is, this unit's good, this unit's playing it. It's to actually figure out why that unit's good. And an example of this I'll give that was in, again, Joshi's server earlier today is someone was complaining about Desolators as opposed to 3 mortar teams. And they were like, well, it doesn't matter that Desolators, are 200 points. They ignore cover. They can get plunging fire. They get Oaths of Moment and +1 to wound. And it's like, well, they don't. They get those for a turn, right? And so you're not comparing 5 shots of 4-2-1 ignores cover, to 9d6 shots of mortar. It's, you're considering 5d3 shots that are good, probably on just the turn 1, because the Vindicator and the Ballistices are going to get them later, to 9d6 shots of 501. And so I'm comparing double the shots on a higher variable dice that don't have AP versus shots that have 1 AP. And it's like, yeah, one of these are better. Like, units fill a role, and calling one unit strictly worse than the other without actually taking time to compare them is going to lead to you cutting out a lot of units that have value. You just haven't explored them yet.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like that in general. I think there's a lot of trying to understand just like, what is this unit doing? Is it only going to be active for one turn? Because some units that you just, like, a lot of Rough Riders, you'll just go like, oh well, they charged a thing and then they died, right? But then there's lots of other units, like you said, like mortars. If you're only getting one activation out of mortars, it's a bad unit. But if you're getting 5 turns of shooting these mortars, suddenly it's a lot more interesting.
And
So,
we did the same thing in this very call, right?
mhm.
Talking about the DPS of the army. We're like, hey, we don't care about the DPS, or sorry, we were like, hey, this army doesn't have the DPS to kill these units, so clearly there's some issues going on, right? And it's like, no, that's not my game plan. My game plan is I just need to have enough to deal with the board.
Yeah.
And that's all I care about in list building, right? Your mortars, you don't care that they're worse for a turn or two when compared to Oaths and Moment. You care that they're good for all 5 turns of the game and slowly whittle your opponent and force them to play.
Yeah.
And so it's just looking at the role of what you want filled.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, then let's go ahead and take a little bit of time and talk about a couple of games because I want to focus in on the ones that were the closest here. So let's go ahead. I think we can go ahead and skip over round 1 that you played into Corn Demonkin and talk about round 2 where you also played into Corn Demonkin. Let's go ahead and talk about that a little bit. What do you remember about this game? Is there anything that made this game as close as it was other than just being 10 points down?
Purge the foe.
Oh.
um,
That'll do it.
yeah. So round 1 was actually closer for what it's worth. But round
Interesting.
round
Okay.
two, round two it was purge the foe. My opponent knew me as a person, right? They were like, I know I don't beat this, and so they just put everything on the line, get turn 1, and just sprint. Nothing's hiding except for like a unit. Everything's going forward. Scarbrand like moves 16 inches forward turn one and just tries to YOLO a turn one charge. He's just full on coin flipping the game. Um, and he lost that trade over time. All of his pieces died. We get to like round four and he's got pretty much nothing on the table. But it just created enough pressure where he was able to get a couple turns of hold more. He was able to get a couple turns, of kill more. And he also took fixed coal assassinate,
Mm,
which led to him, despite completely disregarding secondaries and midboard presence, it led to him getting a very high score out of it. But we get to turn four and there's just nothing on the table, and so he gets his one turn of hold one, his turn of hold one again. But at that point it's just, can I hit 90? And the answer was yeah, I was able to hit 90.
fair. Okay, but the
The
first
notable
one was
thing, if you're like
closer.
cool things, is Scarbrand did die to lasgun, so that was fun.
There you
Just
go.
just 200 lasgun shots whittling
Yeah.
Scarbrand down.
First one you said was closer. Why was the first one closer? Despite the score being, not indicative of that.
He respected me a lot more. And in turn, his list was built to have me respect him more. He was rocking double Hellbrute, which I cannot answer easily as a player. Um, and he also like made sure to screen my reserves. He made sure not to let Ghost play the game. Um, it was closer in the sense of there was a lot more back and forth.
Hmm.
But the scoreboard doesn't represent it because again, I win that back and forth trade.
Fair.
Right, there was a lot more going on. There was a lot more interaction than just YOLO, here's my army. But at the end of the day, when we're playing take and hold for mission one, and I just deny you five primary, five turns in a row, I win the game.
Fair. All right. What other ones of these games were interesting? What else has learning moments in them?
Outside of what we've talked about, um, I think the Death Guard one, round three,
Okay.
has an important thing about Recon, which is that Death Guard list is one you look at and you go, I kill nothing. Like nothing here is easy to kill. There's like a squad, two squads of Nurglings, some beasts and Nurgle, and that's like it. Um, I don't kill Rodriguez, I don't kill a Guo, I don't kill T10, three or two up save, 12 wound vehicles. I just don't.
Yeah.
Um, and so this matchup was a very like logical one. It was a lot of just being like, okay, what's the game plan here? Well, the game plan is obviously score, one more point, or in this case, 11 more points than my opponent. And that's all I need to do. And so we do the turn one roll off. I go sick. I'm going second. It's scorched earth or whatever it was. Let's just play slow. And my opponent moves forward slowly, and they respect that. And on my turn, I just like don't move anything, which is very non-standard to usual 40 game gameplay. I move a single squad forward to walk onto their expansion and deny them from playing their objective. I move one squad up to replace that squad so I can do it again next turn, and then I pass the turn. Like I literally move three squads, and then I go your turn. And at this point, he's recognized he needs to be a bit more aggressive,
Hmm.
but all of his army moves really slow, and so he's barely not able to make it onto the center point. He's barely not able to contest the board, and so I just do the same thing again. One squad is expansion, pass the turn. I'm scoring my secondaries obviously when
Yeah.
needed, but like I am just, if it's a kill secondary, redraw. Otherwise, go for it. And so we get to his top of three. He's down 10 points. Both of us still have our entire army alive, and I have end of turn scoring. And you think about it, it's like I didn't roll dice. I didn't make decisions besides just to sit back. But that one decision won the game,
Yeah.
right? And so it's very methodical, right? I have said it a couple times on like the text channels talking about, but like Recon is not an army that pulverizes people. It is an army that bleeds them dry. It is an army that just whittles them down 3 to 4, 5 points at a time for 5 turns in a row, and then you get to the end of the game, you're up 20, and you call it a day.
Yeah.
And so recognizing when you can send versus recognizing when you just go with the flow is a very important part of Recon.
Interesting. That's so against like I feel like the Ludo narrative part of the game, right? Where like the gameplay is like, oh, it's a bunch of like little scrappy units doing the thing. It's like, here's a human wave. Can you deal with it? So,
Yeah.
I'm glad it works out. I'm glad that you do all this fun innovation. Yeah, I mean it sounds like very very high cognitive load for this army. It's going to take a long time. Um, yeah, I think that's it. Is there anything else you'd want to tell people about this army if they're interested in trying to echo your success?
Um, Genuinely make sure it's something you want to play. um, because for a lot of people, especially if you're newer into modeling, or just 40K in general, I'm sure your army looks like two squads of Catachan, maybe some Krieg, maybe some Cadians, but maybe 20 to 30 at best. And there was a comment on Auspex Tactics video that was very accurate, which is he was like, holy crap, who in their right mind would do that? And then you look down, it says edit. I just looked this up on the Warhammer store, and the infantry alone are $900, right? And so when you're considering the idea that you want to play this list, consider that it is, if you don't have the models and you just want to try something out, it's likely going to be an $800 investment, not, counting for things you already have. And not only that, but painting infantry and building infantry takes a very long time, unless you're okay with the bare minimum of painting standards. Um, and so this isn't easy. It's hard on the table. It's hard on the hobby. Um, and it's going to cause burnout. And so even if you're someone who wants to play this army, it's going to be annoying. Um, and to that, I guess I would say, if you don't have TTS, TTS is your friend. Make sure this is a play style you actually want to play. Because Bridgehead, it was easy to be like, just get 5 Scion squads. You already have the rest because you do. Everything else is just a stock standard unit.
Yeah.
This army, it's not that. This is, yeah, you already have 30 of all the other units. Do you want to get 70 more of them? And that shouldn't be a question from your hobbying and your financial status that you just answer on a whim because it looks cool.
Damn, I wish that had been the last question I had asked. I actually have one more because I feel like that was a great spot to actually just like, all right, end video, close it out. We got the words of wisdom, we're done. The last thing I want to ask though before we go, we'll skip out the hot takes because you have so many different things that you could talk about. Teams, Recon. I do not think we are going to see another player win a singles GT other than you and like maybe Tony Baumeier will do it because he's like the only other good player I know who likes playing this style of list. Teams though, this seems like something that you could take into every team archetype and it's going to have success.
This list is awesome in teams. Um, I you know what? Not many non-guard people are going to watch this, so it's good to talk about. But the best part about Recon Guard is how unexplored it is right now.
Mm-hmm.
And what I say about that is I've done 5 scrims now, all against very like respected teams in the U.S. Like none of them are teams where like if you said them, people wouldn't know who they are, right? Um, I have gotten 119 and 420s playing Recon Guard against them, and every time we'll be like, hey, can we share matrices after the game? And I matrix is like a 15-5 on their matrix. And then we show our matrix, and I have the matrix as the flip side, but at like a 17-3.
Yeah.
And they're like, why was this matchup so bad? And it's just because they have no clue how it works, right? They're like, my 10-man unit of Terminators example comes forward. It's like, no, that sucks against me. Or they're like, oh, our Tau is really good against you. And you're like, you shoot 40 shots a turn. Sucks.
Yeah.
So it's very underexplored and it leads to it being mismatrixed a lot. But the thing that it does really well as a team's role that a lot of people also need is in my opinion the most consistent grenade hopper you could have on a list, right? It is the most consistent list of going, I know this list sucks for all of us. I'll bite the bullet, right? Because at the end of the day, if you put all 200 guardsmen on the line and you just flood the objectives for 3 turns and get absolutely tabled, 10-10. Like almost always 10-10. There's just no list in the game that can effectively clear 250 guardsmen in 3 turns. And so if you are willing to lose the game, but just full send at your opponent and flood the board, you're going to draw. Um, and so it's all around really good. That being said, I've talked with several people on several WTC teams about this because they've also been interested in it. And it always boils down to we don't think the player exhaustion is something we want to put our player through. Um, I there was even one time I was like actively about to start coaching someone on a team about it, and it was like actually no. We thought about it more. Playing this list for 8 games over 3 days or whatever the number is too much,
Yeah.
and so it also has that penalty.
Understandable. I mean, I've told you many times, you've been like, play Recon, and I just go, no. It doesn't, I'm sure looks like a lot of fun to some people who are watching this channel. I know there are lots of people who love playing infantry hordes. I'm not one of them. So, I'll probably play this once or twice. Like, if I can find somebody to play one of these armies against me, I'll try and put it up on like a TTS, like Wednesday stream. And that'll probably be the last time I touch Recon for the rest of the edition. But
Yeah.
anyway, before we go, Nemo, it's been fantastic having you on once again. You are, at this point, the undisputed most common guest on this channel. Anything else you want to say before we let you go?
Um, let's see. What's the random take I could have? This list is still worse than the Aegis defense line list that won the Milwaukee GT. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much for tuning in, everyone, to another episode of Tactical Debrief. I've been Josh Ritchie Howard. This has been Wesley St. Hines with his most recent win to Old Guard Games GT. We'll see you guys all next time. Bye-bye.